I'd like for you to read with me a very important Bible verse. And then I'm going to share with you a very personal and completely apocryphal story, along with a Surgeon General's warning. Now, the verse is John 14, verse 15, and here it is. If you love me, you will obey what I command. In the King James Version, it reads, if ye love me, keep my commandments. Now, let's go to my totally fictional story. Let me emphasize, totally fictional. When I was a little boy, about 6 years old, I made a mistake one day. My dad confronted me with a very stern accusation. Who left the back gate open so the dog could get out? Without thinking, without meaning to, I blurted out the first lie that popped into my head. Dad, Jody did it. Well, I got caught. My dad, with tears in his eyes, took me upstairs, put some of my clothes in a suitcase, and walked me out to the front door. Goodbye, Lonnie, he said. I'm sorry this had to happen. Your mother and I are going to miss you. As I sat there on the front porch wondering where I could go live and how long it might take me to walk 1.5 miles to Grandma's house, I could hear him with a screwdriver changing the lock on the front door. And a couple of minutes later, he picked up the phone. Even though his voice was muffled, I could hear him talking to our family lawyer. I want you to take my first son, Lonnie, out of the Melashenko family will, he said. Instead of E. Lonnie Melashenko, now he's just E. Lonnie. I hate to do it, but he's out. Well, I couldn't take it any longer. My heart was breaking. I knocked on the door and I cried out, Dad, Daddy, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Let me back in the house. And you know, he forgave me. He and my mom both gave me big hugs, and we had strawberry rhubarb pie for supper. And he got out the screwdriver and changed the locks back. And later that night, he called the lawyer at his home and said, forget what I said before. Lonnie's back. We've forgiven him. I want you to put him back in the family will. Wonderful. Well, about 2 days after that, on the way home from school, I did something really dumb. I stopped off at some friend's house and we played ball, probably for about an hour. I just plain lost track of time. And lo and behold, when I got home, there was my suitcase on the front porch. I tried my key in the lock, but Dad had changed it again. For the second time in a week, I was out of the family. So I knocked on the door and told Dad I was sorry that I hadn't really meant to be late. I hadn't done it on purpose. And good news, he let me back in the family. Called up the lawyer and told him, cancel previous instructions, Lonnie's back, so stick him in the will again. And during family worship that evening, I saw in the old Melashenko family Bible where Dad had whited out my name from the family tree, and he took his fountain pen and wrote my name back in on the leaf where the first son should be. For almost a week after that, I stayed in the family. But then one day, I really messed up. I wasn't supposed to go out after supper, but I sneaked out the upstairs window. This time I knew it was wrong, but my friends had dared me, and so I just had to do it. I'd planned the little escape all week, and we went swimming in the midnight down at the pool. Well, when I got home, probably about 10:30, sure enough, there was that suitcase on the porch. Locks changed. Family lawyer taking my name out. Family Bible erased. The works. In fact, I could see my Christmas stocking poking out of the trash barrel out by the driveway. This time, E. Lonnie, not Melashenko, was really a boy without a home. I was out, for real, now. Maybe you'll find it hard to believe, but the next morning, when little frozen Lonnie knocked on the front door, Pastor Joe Melashenko forgave that dumb kid again. Once again, he brought me in the house and changed back the locks and called the lawyer and wrote my name in his Bible and brought back the Christmas stocking and told me, Lonnie, I'm probably making a big mistake, but I guess you can be my son again. Well, end of story. Fictional story. Some of you readers know my dad, and so I've got to make that point absolutely crystal clear. This has been a parable. Well, we've been discussing how God treats his followers who struggle with continuing to sin, sometimes even deliberate sin. And in the experience of Jesus and his 12 disciples who battled the sin of pride for more than 3 years, we discovered a beautiful Bible truth. Jesus did not reject those 12 sinners every time they sinned. They weren't out, then in, then out, then in, not a disciple, not a disciple, a disciple. He didn't operate a revolving door kind of salvation security. He stayed with them and continued to love them and lead them and be a holy example to them. One of my very favorite quotes from a Christian masterpiece is this paragraph from that 19th century book, Steps to Christ. Here it is. There are those who have known the pardoning love of Christ and who really desire to be children of God, yet they realize that their character is imperfect, their life faulty, and they're ready to doubt whether their hearts have been renewed by the Holy Spirit. To such I would say, do not draw back in despair. We shall often have to bow down and weep at the feet of Jesus because of our shortcomings and mistakes, but we are not to be discouraged. Now, mark these wonderful words. Even if we are overcome by the enemy, we are not cast off, not forsaken, and rejected of God. But please notice and listen to what is about to come now. Here's my Surgeon General's warning for the entire year. The next Bible truth, this one is vital, and it is a warning. Pay special heed now to these powerful words of warning from Morris Venden. It is possible for the growing Christian to discover that he has a known sin going on in his life, and at the same time, a continuing relationship with Jesus. But now here comes the critical conclusion. But sooner or later, one or the other is going to go. A man may struggle with the coexistence of trying to serve Jesus Christ and also having an involvement with adultery. But if he continues to walk with Jesus, sooner or later, one or the other of those two is going to go. Those two things cannot exist together indefinitely. Friend, this Bible truth is at the same time both a glorious promise and a sober, somber, serious warning. If you continue to walk with Jesus Christ, he will bring you victory over sin. If you love me, you will obey Jesus' promises in John 14, verse 15. Some sins may immediately disappear. Others may fade away slowly. Still other sins may be overcome only with tremendous effort and kind of gritting of teeth and by going through the fight of your life with God's help. But if you continue to walk with God in his own time and his own way, he will bring you to the point where you do not have two masters in your life. No man can serve two masters, Jesus said. And I guess we should add the word indefinitely. The 12 disciples tried. They wanted to serve both Jesus and self at the same time. But in the end, all 12 of them chose one of two roads. Which brings us to the warning part. Surgeon General's admonition. A man or woman who decides to try to be a Christian and tries to deliberately hang on to a cherished sin at the same time, that Christian is on very dangerous ground. That person may decide they can have both masters simultaneously, that they can travel down both sets of railroad tracks. But sooner or later, one of those two masters has to go. If a person chooses the wrong master, that is a very treacherous place to be. Sometimes the Christian church is accused of preaching what's called cheap grace. God has saved you. Salvation is free. Now go ahead and live as you please. Jesus paid it all. Listen, a person who chooses Jesus and then also determines to live in sin at the same time will, sooner or later, dump one or the other of those two things. Both cannot survive. Do you know something? That's exactly what happened with Judas. Jesus had 12 disciples, and all 12 of them loved him. All 12 followed him. All 12 were devoted to him. But Judas tried to hang on to greed and pride and the sins of coveting and stealing at the same time. And when it became decision time, he, of all the 12, was the only one to deliberately scrap his relationship with Jesus in favor of his sins. His period of coexistence, of serving two masters, came to an abrupt end, and he made his choice. You know, my dad never once kicked me out of the house or took my name away, Melashenko, when I sinned. Never once. He forgave me every time. But if I had tried to keep the name Melashenko and also continue in willful sin, there would have come a time when I would have chosen sin over and above my relationship with my dad. Sooner or later, my attitudes of willful defiance would have driven me to leave Dad. It's always worked that way, and it always will. But let's focus on the good news, on the 11 disciples who stayed with Jesus. They chose Jesus instead of their pride, instead of their selfishness. And you and I can read how their sins and their human passions and their argumentativeness slowly but surely melted away. Jesus became their one master, their only master. And so it can be with us.